It was supposed to be just another day for Officer Bradley, a routine traffic stop on the wrong side of town. But when he pulled over a well-dressed black man and let his prejudice take over, he had no idea who he was dealing with. What started as an abuse of power would soon spiral into a courtroom confrontation that left him frozen in shock and exposed a truth he never saw coming. Before we jump into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love powerful stories of justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so you never miss what's coming next. Now, let's get started. Malcolm Hayes wasn't the type of man to draw attention, at least not at first glance. A calm, calculated demeanor paired with an unassuming presence allowed him to move through life quietly, even as he shattered expectations at every turn. Born and raised in a modest neighborhood, Malcolm had learned early on how to navigate a world that judged him before he ever spoke. But behind the reserved smile and neatly tailored suit lay a man of extraordinary brilliance, a legal mind so sharp it had earned him the title of state's chief prosecutor. Yet Malcolm had no interest in flaunting his achievements. He believed that true power wasn't in appearances, but in actions. That belief would soon be tested in a way he never expected, on a quiet roadside, under the flashing. The moment Officer Bradley approached Malcolm's car, the air grew tense. "License and registration," he barked, not bothering to hide his disdain. Malcolm, ever calm, complied without a word. But Bradley wasn't interested in just a traffic stop. He scrutinized Malcolm's documents with an almost performative skepticism, his voice laced with accusation. "What's a guy like you doing in a car like this?" Malcolm's silence seemed to fuel Bradley's arrogance. The officer began peppering him with loaded questions, his tone growing sharper with each one. "You sure this is your car? Got anything illegal in here? Drugs, maybe?" Malcolm's measured response only irritated him further. It didn't matter that everything checked out. Bradley had already decided Malcolm didn't belong. Within minutes, the situation escalated. Bradley ordered Malcolm out of the car, cuffing him roughly under the pretense of suspicious behavior. Passers-by slowed to watch, some recording on their phones. Malcolm's composure never wavered, but as he was shoved into the back of the police cruiser, one thought lingered in his mind. This wasn't about the law. It was about power. What Bradley didn't realize was that the man he just humiliated had far more power than he could ever imagine, and it was about to change everything. By the time Malcolm was processed and placed in a holding cell, whispers had already started among the officers at the station. Something about him didn't fit the usual profile of their typical arrests. He wasn't panicked, he wasn't angry, he was quietly observant, his eyes scanning everything around him with unnerving calm. It wasn't long before one of the younger officers pulled Bradley aside, his expression uneasy. Did you run his name through the system?" Bradley scoffed at the suggestion but reluctantly typed Malcolm's name into the database. What appeared on the screen made him freeze. Malcolm Hayes, Harvard Law graduate, chief prosecutor for the state. Bradley's face went pale, his confidence evaporating in an instant. Meanwhile, Malcolm sat in his cell, seemingly unaffected by the chaos unraveling outside. He knew exactly who he was, and soon so would everyone else. What Bradley had mistaken for submission was Malcolm's quiet strength, a calculated patience that had carried him through countless battles far more challenging than this. But this wasn't just about clearing his name. Malcolm knew the system inside and out, and he recognized an opportunity when he saw one. What had started as a routine abuse of power was about to expose something much bigger, and Malcolm was prepared to see it through to the end. As word spread through the station about Malcolm's true identity, panic began to ripple among the officers. Bradley, however, was too stubborn, or too arrogant, to admit he'd made a mistake. Chief prosecutor or not, he was acting suspicious, Bradley muttered, doubling down in front of his colleagues. But even as he tried to maintain control, cracks in his confidence began to show. Malcolm, now released from the cell but not yet free to leave, stood calmly in the interrogation room. His quiet demeanor only heightened the tension. When a senior officer finally stepped in, Malcolm made his first request. "I'd like my phone call now," he said, his voice steady but firm. It wasn't a plea. It was a warning. What happened next sent Bradley's anxiety into overdrive. Malcolm's call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to the Attorney General's office. Within an hour, representatives from the state's legal department arrived at the station, armed with paperwork and questions. "We'll need access to the arresting officer's body cam footage," one of them said, their tone leaving no room for argument. The investigation snowballed quickly. Body cam recordings revealed Bradley's baseless accusations and aggressive behavior, painting a damning picture of his conduct. But that wasn't all. Malcolm's calm but piercing questions during his own informal questioning began to unearth deeper issues within the department. Patterns of misconduct, racial profiling, and unchecked abuse of power were now coming to light. Bradley's frustration turned to dread as he realized this wasn't just about his actions anymore. Malcolm's quiet resistance had sparked an avalanche that threatened to expose the rot within the entire system. And the worst part? It wasn't over yet. Malcolm wasn't just clearing his name, he was preparing to dismantle the very foundation of the injustice that brought him here. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the back rows, cameras lined the hallway, and a buzz of anticipation hung in the air. Officer Bradley sat at the defense table, his once smug expression replaced with barely concealed fear. Across the room, Malcolm Hayes sat poised, his sharp suit and calm demeanor commanding respect. But this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about exposing a system that had long operated in the shadows. When Malcolm took the stand, the room fell silent. "State your name and occupation," the prosecutor asked, though everyone in the room already knew. "Malcolm Hayes," he began, his voice steady and deliberate. "State's Chief Prosecutor." The words landed like a thunderclap, sending a ripple of gasps through the courtroom. Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze fixed firmly on the table in front of him. But Malcolm wasn't done. With surgical precision, he detailed the events of that night, highlighting every instance of abuse and bias. Then, turning his attention to the bigger picture, he unveiled damning evidence gathered during the investigation. Internal memos, body cam footage, and witness testimonies that painted a chilling portrait of systemic corruption. The final blow came when Malcolm presented a series of cases, all involving Officer Bradley, that revealed a pattern of targeting minority individuals without cause. "This isn't just about one officer's actions," Malcolm said, locking eyes with the judge. "It's about a system that has allowed prejudice and injustice to fester unchecked, and today we're putting an end to it." The courtroom erupted. The weight of the evidence was undeniable, and Bradley's frozen expression told the entire story. The man who had once wielded his badge as a weapon now sat exposed, powerless against the truth. But as Malcolm's gaze shifted from Bradley to the crowd, one thing was clear. This wasn't just his victory. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been silenced by injustice. And the story wasn't over yet. Malcolm's fight had only just begun. The courtroom's decision was swift and uncompromising. Officer Bradley was found guilty of misconduct, and his actions triggered a broader investigation into the department. Policies were reviewed, accountability measures were introduced, and those who had turned a blind eye to injustice were finally being held responsible. It was a moment of reckoning not just for one man, but for an entire system. As Malcolm stepped out of the courthouse, the crowd erupted into applause. Reporters swarmed him, microphones shoved in his face, but he raised a hand for silence. "This isn't about me," he said, his voice carrying the weight of his message. "This is about justice. For every person who's been targeted, silenced, or dismissed simply because of who they are. This is about reminding the world that integrity and truth are more powerful than hate and prejudice." His words struck a chord, spreading far beyond the courthouse steps. The case became a national symbol of resilience and the power of standing up against oppression. no matter how deeply rooted it might seem. For Malcolm, the victory was bittersweet. He knew this was only one battle in a much larger war, but it reaffirmed his belief in the power of persistence, integrity, and truth. He had faced the system designed to break him and emerged stronger, not just for himself, but for those who would follow in his footsteps. Prejudice and injustice thrive in silence, but courage, resilience, and unwavering integrity can shatter even the most entrenched systems of oppression. Change doesn't come easily, but with people like Malcolm willing to fight, it always comes. Thank you for watching. Maya's story reminds us that standing up for what's right can create lasting change. Whether it's overcoming adversity or challenging injustice, your voice matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts on the story. Let's keep this conversation going. And remember, sharing these stories helps spread the message of justice and fairness, one act of courage at a time. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.